My dad leaned across the counter at Atlanta International, looked straight at my grandpa, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Come on, Dad, you're not invited. We already spent your money." I saw my grandpa's hand tighten on the handle of his old suitcase, his proud smile vanishing in an instant. $2 million gone, and now he was being told he didn't even belong on the trip he paid for. The agent looked stunned. Travelers turned to stare, and my chest burned with rage. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't a mistake. It was betrayal. And as we walked out of that terminal together, my grandpa leaned close and whispered a secret to me. A secret my dad and the rest of the family would never see coming. When I think back, it's not the mansions or the marble floors that come to mind. It's the quiet moments where my grandpa was the only one who remembered me. People in Charleston loved to talk about the Carter name. They saw my dad cutting ribbons in front of new high-rises, my mom smiling under chandeliers at charity balls, and my Aunt Susan parading purses online like trophies. To outsiders, we were untouchable, a dynasty polished to perfection. But inside those glittering walls, there was only one person who ever made me feel seen: my grandpa. I can still hear his laugh, the kind that shook the porch rail and startled the birds in the magnolia trees. He had this way of making even silence feel alive. When I was a kid, my parents forgot me after school more times than I could count. I'd sit on the curb clutching my backpack, watching the other kids run to their parents' arms. Just when my throat tightened with shame, I'd see the old pickup truck pull in my grandpa leaning out the window. "Hop in, kiddo," he'd grin like rescuing me was the best part of his day. The truck smelled like sawdust and peppermint. To this day, that smell is home to me. He was at every piano recital, even when no one else showed. I remember being 10, wearing a hand-me-down dress that didn't quite fit my fingers, trembling over the keys. The crowd clapped politely when I finished, but over them all came one booming cheer, two hands clapping like thunder. I turned crimson, but he stood up anyway, whistling like I was the star of Carnegie Hall. My dad rolled his eyes when I told him later, saying, "Music was a phase, not a future." My mom added that it was cute but not worth investing in lessons. My grandpa just winked and slipped me a new sheet of music, saying, "Play for yourself, Harper. That way no one can take it away." The contrast between him and the rest of them grew sharper as I got older. My dad treated my grandpa like a walking checkbook. I'd catch the twitch in his jaw whenever Grandpa gave me birthday gifts, like he couldn't stand the idea of love not being measured in assets. My mom was colder. She'd sip her wine and say, "Richard spoils you. Don't rely on him so much. Harper, you'll regret it." Yet the moment a new luxury car appeared in the driveway, she never asked whose money greased the wheels. Aunt Susan was even worse, draping herself over Grandpa at gatherings, cooing about how much she adored him, then hissing later about why he didn't fund Greg's latest genius idea. Her kids Chloe and Ethan barely looked up from their phones. Once I watched Grandpa try to tell Ethan about the early days building Carter Properties, how he started with nothing but a beat-up briefcase. Ethan didn't even nod, just scrolled TikTok until Susan called him for dessert. Grandpa never called them out. He'd just sip his black coffee, his fingers curled loosely around the mug, his eyes soft with a kind of ache that words can't cover. He built this empire brick by brick. Through nights so long he forgot what dawn looked like, and all he wanted was to see his family sit at the same table with genuine laughter. I'll never forget one porch evening when the sky burned violet and the marsh grass bent in the breeze. He leaned back in his chair and sighed, "All I want, Harper, is for them to love each other the way I love them. Maybe one day they'll see." I squeezed his hand, feeling the roughness of years of work etched in his skin. I wanted to promise him it would come true, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. I knew my dad and aunt would never see him as more than a bank account. And then one day, everything shifted. My dad, who barely called his own father, except on birthdays, suddenly picked up the phone 3 times in a week. His tone was syrupy, forced. "Dad, how are you feeling? Eating well?" "You know, I've been thinking we should spend more time together." I nearly dropped my mug listening from the hall. My dad didn't think about family. He thought about profits. Then came Susan sashaying into Grandpa's estate with a box of imported chocolates and a smile too bright to be real. "Dad, you've worked all your life. You deserve the world. Greg and I were just saying we should all take a trip. Paris, Rome, London. Imagine it, all of us together." Even my mom, who usually spoke to Grandpa like he was an obligation, began calling every other day, her voice coated in sugar. "Richard, are you sleeping well? I saw a scarf that reminded me of you." She actually mailed it. A cashmere scarf folded so carefully, Grandpa whispered, "Too nice to wear." Chloe posted on Instagram, "Can't wait for family trip to Europe. Our family first." Ethan muttered one evening, "It'll be fun, Grandpa," without lifting his eyes from the glow of his phone. For the first time in years, I saw Grandpa's eyes light with real hope. He told me late one night, his voice quiet but eager, "Wouldn't it be wonderful, Harper?" Just once to see them laughing together, I nodded, but unease gnawed at me. Their sudden warmth felt rehearsed. Still, I hugged him and whispered, "If it makes you happy, then yes." I wanted his dream to come true so badly, even as a cold knot formed in my stomach. It started with whispers through the bedroom door. I wasn't supposed to hear them, but fate has a cruel way of handing you the truth when you least want it. My mom's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Did he transfer it?" My dad's reply was low, satisfied, final. "Yes. 2 million. Straight from his investment account. Everything's set." I froze in the hallway, my hand pressed to the wall as if it could steady the quake inside me. $2 million. Money my grandpa had spent a lifetime building, money he believed was going toward a family memory he'd been aching for. And here were his own children plotting like thieves in their own home. My chest tightened. I wanted to burst into the room, scream, demand answers. Instead, I swallowed the fire and slipped back into the shadows, my mind spiraling. Maybe they'd still bring him. Maybe the money bought his ticket, too. Maybe this nightmare wasn't as cruel as it sounded. I clung to that fragile hope for days. It was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. And when the morning of departure arrived, I forced a smile as Grandpa showed up at our house, his old leather suitcase in hand. He wore his best gray blazer, the one that smelled faintly of cedar, and his eyes shone with boyish excitement. "Harper," he whispered, pressing my hand. "Paris. I'll finally see the Eiffel Tower." I hugged him tight, my throat burning. "Of course, Grandpa, and I'll be right next to you." The drive to Atlanta International felt like a parade for everyone except him. My dad cracked jokes with Aunt Susan about wine tours in Tuscany. My mom typed furiously on her phone, already posting a family adventure begins caption. Chloe and Ethan sat glued to their screens, earbuds sealing them in their own world. And next to me in the back seat, Grandpa sat in silence, fingers tapping lightly on his suitcase handle, glancing at my dad now and then as if trying to convince himself this was real. The airport was buzzing, all glass and noise and the smell of overpriced coffee. Families hugged goodbye, children ran toward gates, luggage wheels clicked against the floor. I held Grandpa's arm, guiding him through the crowd. "Don't worry," I whispered. "Everything's fine." But my stomach told me otherwise. We lined up at check-in passports stacked neatly in the agent's hands, my dad, my mom, Susan, Greg, the cousins. Beeps of approval echoed one after another. Then came Grandpa's turn. The agent frowned, typing again, her brow furrowing. "I'm sorry. I don't see a reservation for Richard Carter." The world tilted. What I blurted. "That can't be right. Try again." She did, shaking her head. "No booking under that name." Grandpa blinked, confused. "There must be a mistake. My son handled the arrangements." He turned to my dad, his voice trembling with hope. "Michael..." And then came the dagger. My dad stepped forward, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Dad, I forgot your ticket. Just go home." My grandpa's hand clenched on his suitcase handle. His proud smile, the smile that had carried him through decades of sacrifice, collapsed in an instant. "No," I snapped, my voice shaking. "He paid for this entire trip. $2 million. How could you?" Harper Susan hissed, her smile glued on for the strangers around us. "Lower your voice. You're embarrassing us, embarrassing." My chest burned. What's embarrassing is abandoning your own father after stealing his money. Travelers turned their heads, whispers rising around us. Chloe muttered, so dramatic, without looking up from her phone. Ethan tugged at his hoodie, pretending not to hear. My mom's voice slid in, falsely soothing Dad. "Traveling that far isn't good for your health. We'll bring you something nice from Europe." Grandpa's shoulders shook, but he didn't cry. He was too proud for that. He just whispered, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong." That broke something in me. I wrapped my arms around him. "No, Grandpa, you belong with me. If they can't see your worth, then they don't deserve you." My dad's face flushed red. "Enough, Harper. Don't be dramatic. If you walk away, now don't expect us to take care of you when you crawl back." Susan sneered, her tone sharp as glass. "You're ruining this for everyone. Stop acting like a child throwing a tantrum." I looked at each of them, the cold eyes of my mom, Susan's smirk, Chloe's glazed-over stare, Ethan's headphones, and then at my grandpa clutching that suitcase like it was the last piece of dignity he had left. And in that moment, I made my choice. I stood up and walked out. We left them there, their luxury luggage piled high, their tickets in hand, their lies intact. Grandpa and I walked out of that terminal together, the crowd swirling around us like we were ghosts. His suitcase sat heavy at his side, and just as the automatic doors slid open to the humid Georgia air, he leaned close, his voice low trembling but clear. "Harper, there's something I never told them, something they'll never see coming." The ride back from Atlanta felt like 3 hours of silence stretched into a lifetime. The city lights blurred past the windows, but all I heard was my grandpa's breathing, uneven, shallow, broken in a way I'd never heard before. His old suitcase balanced on his knees like an anchor. He didn't speak until halfway down the highway. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "Maybe I don't belong anymore, Harper. Maybe I'm just outdated." The words stabbed through me. "No," I said fiercely, gripping his arm. "They don't deserve you. They stole from you. But I won't let them get away with it." He gave me a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes, and turned to the window. Neon signs flickered across the glass, painting his face in fractured colors like a man fading out of his own story. When we pulled into the estate, the gates opened on marble pillars and manicured lawns that suddenly looked like stage props for a cruel play. Grandpa set his suitcase down in the foyer. The sound echoed in the hollow house. "I built all of this for them," he murmured, his shoulders slumping. "And tonight I realized it means nothing." I swallowed hard. "It still means something to me, Grandpa. You mean everything to me." He didn't answer. He just wandered into his study and sank into the leather armchair by the fireplace. I found him later tracing his finger over an old family photo, the one with my dad and Susan grinning beside him, me as a child in front. The firelight flickered, but it couldn't warm him. That night, something hardened inside me. If they thought they could rob him blind and walk away untouched, they were wrong. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was silent except for the grandfather clock's slow, heavy ticks. I slipped into the study, searching through his desk. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, a folder labeled Travel Itinerary. Inside was a wire transfer receipt, $2,000 moved from Richard Carter's investment account to my dad's personal account. My stomach twisted. Proof. I needed more. So I drove downtown to the travel agency that had arranged the trip. The manager, Holly Sanders, remembered the booking. Her eyes narrowed as she scrolled the records. Yes, Mr. Carter paid for the entire package. First-class flights, luxury hotels, $2 million all up front. She paused, then frowned. But look, his name isn't on the traveler list. It looks like it was removed before final confirmation. The ground beneath me seemed to shift. "You're saying it was deliberate?" She nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. I can provide a written statement if needed." I thanked her, clutching the papers so tightly they crumpled in my hands. This wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated theft. When I showed the documents to Grandpa that evening, he stared at them in silence. His hands shook as he traced the lines of the transfer. "Michael," he whispered, "my own son." I grabbed his hand. "We can't stay quiet. There are laws against this. I found a group that helps protect seniors from abuse, Adult Protective Services. We can call them." His head snapped up, panic flashing in his eyes. "No, they're my children, Harper. I don't want to destroy them." "They destroyed themselves," I shot back. "You gave them everything and they left you standing in an airport like you were nothing. This isn't love, it's exploitation. If we don't speak up, they'll keep doing it. Maybe not to you again, but to someone else. Silence only protects them." He looked at me for a long time. I saw the war in his eyes, love twisted into loyalty, loyalty poisoned into fear. Finally, he exhaled and whispered, "If you believe it's right, then I trust you." The next morning, my hands trembled as I dialed the number. The line clicked and a calm voice answered. "Adult Protective Services. This is Daniel Hayes. How can I help you?" I poured out everything, the transfer, the trip, the humiliation at the airport. My voice shook, but Daniel's didn't. "Do you have proof of the transfer?" he asked. "Any witnesses?" "Yes," I said quickly. "I have the receipt and the travel agency manager is willing to testify." There was a pause, then his tone sharpened. "That's enough to open an investigation. I'll need you and your grandfather to come into our office." When I hung up, my pulse was racing. Fear and relief tangled in my chest. For the first time since the airport, I felt something I thought I'd lost hope. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell Susan. Not yet. They were somewhere across the ocean drinking champagne on a stolen dream. And while they were clinking glasses, I was laying the first bricks of their downfall quietly, carefully, in silence. Grandpa asked me that night, "What happens now?" I squeezed his hand. "Now we wait, and when they come home, we'll be ready." The weeks that followed felt like waiting inside the eye of a storm, eerily quiet, but I could sense the walls trembling. Grandpa and I kept to ourselves at the estate, the two of us orbiting one another in silence that said more than words. Some nights I caught him sitting alone on the porch, staring into the marsh, as though trying to measure how far loyalty could stretch before it broke. I never interrupted. I just made sure the lights inside were warm when he came back. Daniel Hayes from Adult Protective Services called regularly, updating us with the patience of someone who had seen too many families tear each other apart. "We've opened a case," he said. "When they land back in Atlanta, we'll serve the summons. Harper, you need to stay calm. Don't engage until then." But staying calm was harder than it sounded, because while they were sipping wine under the Paris skyline, I started receiving the first messages. At first, they came disguised as concern. My mom's text pinged one evening. "Sweetheart, are you and Grandpa okay? You didn't have to leave the airport like that." We were worried. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. Worried they left him behind with a suitcase and no ticket. I didn't reply. Then Susan chimed in, her tone saccharine as always. "Harper, I know you're emotional, but you can't let Grandpa's stubbornness ruin things for everyone. He wasn't fit to travel, you know that." I almost threw my phone across the room. Not fit. He was the one who funded their luxury adventure. I shoved the phone in a drawer and left it there, buzzing like a snake I refused to touch. The calls began next. My dad's voice filled the voicemail with manufactured authority. "Harper, answer the phone. You're overreacting. You embarrassed us at the airport. That kind of behavior is unacceptable." Unacceptable. As if betrayal was acceptable, but defending Grandpa was not. Every message grew sharper, nastier. "You're tearing this family apart. Do you realize what you've done to our reputation? When you need help one day, don't expect us to be there." It wasn't just calls. Word started trickling in from friends around Charleston. Neighbors mentioned my aunt had been gossiping at the country club Harper's gone unstable. She's turning Richard against his children. My dad told colleagues at the firm that I was confused, manipulated by an old man losing his grip. The smear campaign hurt, but it didn't surprise me. I'd grown up watching them rewrite stories to fit their narrative. This was just another chapter in the book of denial they all lived by. One night, Grandpa overheard one of the voicemails. My dad's voice hissed through the speaker. "You're a traitor, Harper. Blood is blood, and you've chosen wrong." Grandpa's hand trembled on the armrest, his knuckles white. "Maybe we should drop this," he whispered, as if confessing a sin. "They're my children. I can't bear to see them humiliated." I turned to him, fire rising in my chest. "Humiliated, Grandpa, they humiliated you, in front of strangers. After robbing you blind, they're not victims, they're predators. And the only reason they're scared now is because for the first time they don't hold the leash." He looked at me long and hard, his eyes wet, and nodded once. After that, he didn't bring up dropping the case again. The pressure mounted as their return date drew closer. I stopped going into town to avoid the whispers. Instead, I buried myself in paperwork with Daniel. Every receipt, every statement, every testimony lined up like dominoes ready to fall. The more evidence we stacked, the more frantic their messages became. Susan sent a string of texts one night, the mask slipping completely. "If you ruin us, you'll regret it. Do you think anyone will believe a spoiled little girl over her whole family? You'll be disowned, cut off, forgotten." I read it out loud to Grandpa. His lips pressed into a thin line. Then he whispered, "They don't realize you already know what it feels like to be forgotten. That's why they can't touch you anymore." Those words burned into me like armor. For the first time, I felt untouchable, not because I was stronger than them, but because Grandpa believed I was. And then came the night before their flight home. Daniel called his tone firm. "They land at Atlanta International tomorrow evening. I'll be there with the summons. Harper, are you ready?" I looked across the room at Grandpa, sitting straight in his chair, his old leather suitcase at his feet like a reminder of the day they betrayed him. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were steady. Yes, I told Daniel my voice steady for the first time in weeks, more ready than they are. As I hung up the phone, I realized the storm wasn't approaching anymore. It was here. And this time, we weren't running. The arrivals terminal at Atlanta International was buzzing with laughter and rolling suitcases when Grandpa and I stepped inside. Travelers streamed out of the gate with Paris stickers plastered on their luggage and duty-free bags swinging at their sides. I gripped Grandpa's hand, my stomach in knots. Beside us stood Daniel Hayes from Adult Protective Services, his suit sharp, a folder of documents tucked beneath his arm like a loaded weapon. I saw them before they saw me, my dad Michael strutting in a tailored coat, sunglasses perched like a crown, my mom trailing just behind, scrolling through her phone as if even reality could be ignored with enough screen time. Aunt Susan looped her silk-scarved arm through Greg's, her laugh brittle and high-pitched. Chloe and Ethan dragged their shopping bags, chattering about boutiques, looking like extras in an ad for a life they didn't earn. Then their eyes caught us. My dad's smile faltered first. "Dad, Harper. What are you doing here?" before I could answer. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but razor sharp. "Mr. Michael Carter, Mrs. Linda Carter, Mrs. Susan Miller, Mr. Greg Miller. You've been served. This is a summons regarding allegations of financial exploitation against Mr. Richard Carter." He handed each of them an envelope. The air around us shifted. Conversations slowed, heads turned, strangers whispered. My mom's face drained of color. This has to be some kind of mistake. Susan clutched her purse. Financial abuse. "He gave us the money." Daniel didn't flinch. "The court will decide." My dad's voice dropped to a growl. "Dad, tell them this isn't true. Tell them you wanted us to go." Grandpa's voice shook, but it carried through the terminal. "I wanted us to go together. I never wanted to be left behind." The words echoed louder than the announcements blaring over the intercom. For the first time, people weren't looking at my dad with admiration. They were looking at him with disgust. I stepped forward, my pulse hammering in my throat. It wasn't Grandpa who called APS. It was me. Their heads snapped toward me. My dad's face twisted crimson. You dare turn against your own parents? Yes, I said, my voice steady. Because you stopped being parents the moment you betrayed him. You stole his money, his trust, and his dignity. I won't let you get away with it. Susan sneered, her mask slipping. You foolish girl, do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed this family. No, I shot back coldly. You destroyed it the day you left him at that airport. For a moment, no one spoke. Chloe muttered, "This is so stupid," while Ethan pulled his headphones back over his ears. Greg swore under his breath. My mom's eyes darted around the gawking crowd, shame etched into her face for the first time. And my dad, the man who had always towered over me, looked small-cornered, desperate. Daniel closed his folder. "We'll see you in court." The Charleston courthouse wasn't grand, but stepping inside felt like walking onto a battlefield. Wooden benches, the state seal above the judge's chair, every eye on us. Grandpa stayed home that day. He couldn't bear to face them, but I carried him in my heart. On one side sat me and Daniel. Across the aisle, my dad, my mom, Aunt Susan, and Greg, stiff as mannequins, beside their slick lawyer. Their glares burned holes in me. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, banged her gavel. Court is now in session. Daniel rose. "Your Honor, this case is about exploitation. Richard Carter, a 78-year-old man, transferred $2 million to his children under the promise of a family trip. Instead, when the day arrived, he was left at the airport. This is elder financial abuse." Their attorney leapt up. "Objection. Mr. Carter voluntarily gifted those funds. My clients are guilty of nothing but generosity." The judge gestured. "Proceed with evidence." Daniel clicked the projector. The wire transfer appeared on the screen, $2 million from Richard Carter's account to my dad's. Then the travel itinerary, every name listed except Grandpa's. Murmurs rippled through the room. I was called to the stand. My hands trembled as I swore the oath. Daniel's voice softened. "Miss Carter, tell us what happened at the airport." I inhaled sharply. We were all in line. When it was my grandpa's turn, the agent said there was no ticket. My dad looked him in the eye and said, "Dad, I forgot your ticket. Just go home." Gasps erupted. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. He had paid for everything. He believed this was his chance to unite the family, but they never intended to take him. They abandoned him. Their lawyer shot up. Hearsay Daniel raised a hand. "Not hearsay. We have corroboration." The doors opened. In walked Holly Sanders, the travel agent. She testified calmly that my grandpa's name was deliberately removed. An airport staffer followed, confirming they overheard my dad's cruel words. Piece by piece, the puzzle was laid bare. Finally, my dad demanded to speak. He stood, fists clenched. "This is absurd. My father is old. He wouldn't have survived the trip. We spared him." I jumped to my feet, unable to stay silent. Spared him. You call stealing his money and humiliating him in public a kindness. No, you did it for yourself, for shopping bags and champagne. The judge banged her gavel. Order my dad pointed at me. His face twisted. "You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, you've done nothing for me." I cut in, my voice breaking. "He raised me. He loved me. And you betrayed him." The courtroom fell silent. The judge's eyes hardened. She turned to the jury. "Do you find sufficient evidence of financial abuse?" The foreman stood. "We do." My breath caught. The judge's voice rang out. "This court orders Michael Carter, Linda Carter, Susan Miller, and Greg Miller to repay the full $2 million. Furthermore, due to their conduct, they are stripped of all inheritance rights and future guardianship over Richard Carter. This ruling will remain on permanent record." For a moment, the room was frozen. Then Susan broke sobbing into her hands. Greg cursed. My mom bowed her head, shame staining her silence. My dad slammed his fist on the table, roaring, "This is an outrage. We're his family." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Exactly. And that makes your betrayal all the more reprehensible." Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't of defeat. They were relief. Justice had spoken. As I left the courthouse, Daniel touched my shoulder. "You did well, Harper. Not many have the courage to stand against their own blood." Outside, the evening sun drenched Charleston in gold. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Grandpa. My voice broke into a smile as I whispered, "It's over. They can't hurt you anymore." And in that moment, I knew the echo of this victory would ring louder than their lies ever could. When I returned to the Charleston estate after the trial, Grandpa was waiting on the porch. The sight of him standing there nearly broke me. He looked smaller somehow, as if the weeks of betrayal had chipped pieces off his frame. But when he saw me step out of the car, his eyes searched mine with the urgency of a man needing air. I didn't have to speak, he knew. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "They can't hurt you anymore, Grandpa." He rose slowly from his chair, his old blazer hanging looser than before, and pulled me into his arms. His shoulders trembled against mine. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lifting, not gone, but lighter, as if justice had carved a hole for light to come in. The days that followed were quiet. We didn't talk about the courtroom. We didn't rehash the betrayals. Instead, we filled the silence with small rituals: morning coffee on the porch, tending to the garden, sorting through old photos not to mourn what was lost, but to reclaim what was still ours. Grandpa still carried scars, the way his eyes lingered on the empty chairs at the dining table, the way he sometimes trailed off mid-story when he remembered who wasn't there to listen. But he no longer spoke of being outdated. He no longer questioned if he belonged. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the study windows, he set his mug down and looked at me. "Harper, I don't want the rest of my life to be about betrayal. I want to give meaning to what's left." That was the seed. Together we created the Richard Carter Foundation, a trust dedicated to protecting seniors from financial exploitation. Every dollar recovered from the lawsuit was poured into it. We set up grants for community centers, funded hotlines for abuse victims, trained volunteers to spot the signs of exploitation. The first time we walked into a small community hall to deliver support, I watched my grandpa shake hands with other elders, his voice firm again as he told them, "You're not forgotten. You matter." His eyes glowed in a way I hadn't seen since before the airport. The people there didn't know the Carter name as a dynasty of real estate. They knew it as a promise of protection. At night, when the house grew still, I sometimes caught him studying me. "You saved me, Harper." He'd whisper, his voice heavy with gratitude. I always answered the same way. "No, Grandpa, you saved me. You showed me what family really means." Months passed. The mansion, once suffocating in its silence, began to echo with life again, not from chandeliers or marble floors, but from laughter and purpose. Instead of empty dinners, we hosted workshops. Instead of hollow portraits, we filled the walls with letters of thanks from people whose lives the foundation touched. Sometimes in the quiet moments, I thought about my dad, my mom, and Susan. Their absence was a scar, yes, but no longer a wound. They chose greed. I chose love. And in that choice, I found freedom. One evening, sitting beside Grandpa on the porch, the same marsh stretching out before us, I asked him if he ever regretted what happened. He sipped his coffee, eyes reflecting the fading sunset. "No," he said slowly, "because betrayal showed me who truly stood by me. You. That's enough." I leaned my head on his shoulder. For years, I'd chased the idea of family as something unbreakable, bound by blood. But now I understood family is loyalty. Family is love. Family is the ones who don't walk away when the suitcase is heavy and the crowd is watching. Grandpa carried that belief until his last breath. And now it's the legacy I carry forward. Not the Carter fortune, not the empire of buildings, but the foundation of trust he built in me. His lesson, his truth, his gift. And every time I see his old suitcase by the study door, the one he packed for the trip he never took, I don't see rejection anymore. I see resilience. I see the day we chose each other. and I whisper to myself so he'll always hear it, "You belong, Grandpa, always." Have you ever seen someone you love betrayed by the very people who should protect them? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if you believe loyalty matters more than money, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me for more true stories that need to be heard.